Welcome to the guest show. This week, I'm being double teamed by two very attractive young women. I'm incredibly young.
Stop. No, that's not cool. Let's start again.
Under 100. Anybody's young compared to me. They come from a charity called Just Life. I have Fran, if I can call you Fran. Is that okay?
Yeah, Fran is great. Thank you very much.
And Alex has done the runner. Hello,
yeah, Alex is too busy laughing.
Yeah, okay. So, first of all, Fran's going to introduce us to what Just Life is. It's a great title. Please go ahead.
Okay, so the aim of Just Life is to make stays in temporary accommodation short, safe, and healthy. And this underpins everything that we do. A large part of our work is to raise the awareness that stays in temporary accommodation are actually homelessness. This has been discussed quite a lot in your podcast. Vicky was talking about it this week. So lots of people think that homelessness is rough sleeping, whereas that's just the tip of the iceberg. And an awful lot of people, in fact, 104,000 households are living in temporary accommodation now, and it's a number which is growing quarter upon quarter. So how do we do this? How do we make stays in temporary accommodation short, safe, and healthy? Well, first of all, we do it through frontline services in Brighton and in Manchester. The focus of our work in Brighton is on health engagement. So we know that we know that homelessness is a health issue. So we help people to get adequate healthcare support for both their physical and mental health. So then they can start looking at more permanent accommodation. They can start looking at income maximization and having a more sustainable life. In Manchester, our focus is on prison leavers and also people who don't have a homeless duty but are living in temporary accommodation, like bed and breakfast, and do need some support and advocacy in order to be able to get some permanent housing. We've also got social connection projects in both Brighton and Manchester, and that's for people who have moved through our frontline services and want to become part of their larger community, to move away from homelessness services. So we have a befriending scheme, we have an activities program, we have a peer support program. So that's all the frontline stuff that we do. We then take everything that we learn through our frontline work and share it through our networks work. So this includes Frontline Network, which we coordinate the National Temporary Accommodation Frontline Network, also some local frontline networks. We also have a national programme of temporary accommodation action groups, which brings together all the stakeholders in a temporary accommodation. So that's landlords, local authorities, people who have experience of temporary accommodation, people who are providing care to people in temporary accommodation, and they look together to decide what the issues are locally and try to bring about local systems change. We do find that lots of the same issues are coming out of the temporary accommodation action groups, and we're able to feed this up into the all-party parliamentary group for households in temporary accommodation, which we are the co-secretariat of with Shared Health. So through this, we do a lot of research, policy and campaigning work. And we've just successfully had the code of guidance for homelessness for local authorities changed, so that there's space for cots and the provision of cots in temporary accommodation. So, but really important to say that all this work we do is underpinned by consideration and the involvement and the leadership of people with lived experience of temporary accommodation, which is where my colleague Alex comes in.
Okay, I've got a question for you, or maybe Alex can answer this, because I'm very interested now. You mentioned about prisoners. Because I know through some of my research, I'm trying to get a couple of people I know to come on. Prisoners are not offered accommodation when they come out of prison. that's a general thing. Either they're given a small stipend, maybe 30-40 pounds,
or less,
or
less than that.
tent.
Yeah. Okay, so they should actually be offered they should be offered at least temporary accommodation.
Yeah,
and that's where we
work.
yeah.
I used to work for the probation. I used to
Right.
with another writer help run a drama group at the probation office in Camden. We end up doing every Christmas we do a pantomime tour, and I know at that stage they were, but I speak to some other people in the theatre companies who work with prisoners, and they said that does not happen anymore.
Okay, well, that's an absolute tragedy, and no one should be leaving prison without somewhere to stay, even if it is just temporary accommodation. So, so they're the group of people that we work with in Manchester who come out of prison, and there's nowhere permanent for them to go, so they're placed in temporary accommodation, and we work with them to assimilate themselves back into the community in any way we can. So we get them a GP.
I'd be very interested to know these other organisations' secretariats. I'd like to approach them. But the other thing you're saying is, you mentioned Vicky the week before. I had Jonathan on.
Yeah.
And I mentioned last September, I think it was 1.7 billion pounds for temporary accommodation. It's now gone up to 2.1, he informed me.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised.
It is a huge problem, and it is now bankrupting lots of local authorities because there isn't anywhere for people to move on to, because of the lack of social housing, because of the cost of private rent. We'll have to see if the local housing allowance being increased from April makes any difference to this. Let's hope that it does, but I
know from somebody who's experienced, and I was discussing this with my friend Neil the other day. We were in the same place in Lewisham. The day after I moved in, I was always doing lots of voluntary work. I was out. When I come back, the woman who's in the next room, which they managed to change into flats. It was a room. Channel 4 had appeared. And the councillor said, "I'm going to get you out." As I just got off the street at that point, that scared the hell out of me. That landlords have access to what the local housing allowance is. And what they do is, whoever they are, they put it up to the maximum they can get. Even if it's, actually, it wasn't as bad as my temporary accommodation, I must admit, which I called the tip. But it was bad, and there were several cases that I could cite, and Neil could cite as well, in that place, that weren't done to the correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
So. But I'm glad there is an organisation that supports people in temporary accommodation, because I don't think the councils do enough, in my opinion.
Well, they just don't have capacity or the budget. They've all been stripped bare. And I think it varies from council to council as well. I know certainly in the work we've done with the TAG network, some councils will approach, about setting up temporary accommodation action groups, and they'll have a temporary accommodation team, whereas others won't have any temporary accommodation team. So I think I think that with a lack of guidance from the central government, it means that councils don't have a model to set up to provide that support. Obviously not letting any bad practice that might happen locally off the hook, but generally I do think that's something that I've noticed in my work. But it just varies so much from area to area.
Well, also this Rent Reform Act that's going through.
Precisely, yeah.
By now, you might have heard this will be going out next Monday. But I've always just sent an email to the press office. It's supposed to be watered down. I'm waiting for Section 20 on this, going to be eradicated, which is my one wish. But they say there are several other areas. It's interesting, this phrase, action groups, what does that mean? Can you answer that question?
Yeah.
So we set up a specific type of action group called TAG, which is Temporary Accommodation Action Group. And basically they were born out of some research that our research and policy team did, I think about, was it 5 years ago? Something like 5 years ago. With a group of residents of temporary accommodation, trying to find out what blocks solutions locally to temporary accommodation being improved and people's stays being short, safe and healthy. And the outcome of that research was that there was a real lack of people talking to each other. So there wasn't a joined up approach to how we support people, how we run temporary accommodation happening. So the idea for an action group came out of that. And basically, an action group is a space where they meet maybe once a month, where people who are involved in a local temporary accommodation system, and it's always local, so in that borough or that area or that local authority, come together, discuss what issues are facing people living in temporary accommodation and the temporary accommodation system locally, and then work together to try and find solutions. And what's really interesting about these temporary accommodation action groups, the model that we work with is a non-judgmental space. So that means that everyone who's there is able to speak, and that means that we have to make space for different opinions or for people from different sectors, I suppose, which can be a challenge because sometimes we have local authority and people with lived experience and landlords, if we're lucky, in the room with us. And it's about creating a space where everyone feels safe and able to talk equally so that then we can work together towards solutions. So yeah, we've got, I think we've got 7 now, maybe more.
We've got 11.
We've got 11 now, not 7,
Yeah.
11.
11 tags. If anyone's wanting to know more, we have actually got a temporary accommodation action group guide, which we're happy to share with absolutely anyone, because we really see this as a model for bringing about local systems change.
Is this an online guide?
Yes, it is.
What you can do is send me the link to it, Fran.
Yeah. I can do that.
Description. I'm quite interested because actually I was last week at a meeting at the ministry, and we were talking about housing as such. And I'm involved in an organisation called Expert Link. Who several of my guests are involved in. And after we were talking about the ministry want to get the department we're involved, which is do want to get people involved. And we spoke about people are not used to being at meetings.
Yeah.
And that must be a struggle at times, isn't it?
I think it's about, and yeah, it is the short answer, but it's about understanding, as Fran says, and as you've alluded to, the power in the room. And then part of what we do as an organisation is we have a facilitatory approach. So that means that we, when we work with people who have lived experience, who maybe aren't used to those meeting spaces, that will create other, so for example, in the London group, we have a lived experience only meeting where people can come together and talk to each other and get support from our facilitator to be able to attend those meetings on a more even footing. Because you're absolutely right. I think that there's so many stages to really including people, and the most critical stage that's often missed out is accounting for power and making sure everyone going into that room is equipped with whatever they need to be able to be on an even footing. And I think that's forgotten about sometimes, but we definitely try to account for that.
I think it's
extra support, that kind of thing. It's part of the reason why my role exists, isn't it?
Yeah,
so to help with that.
I think it is that, you go to a meeting, oh yeah. You want to shout and scream. I know that doesn't work for me. But a lot of people will come there with it. There's a little bit in criminology about something called payback. Everybody does something for a payback. I do this because I enjoy it. That's it. I like to inform people about things. I like meeting other people. That's my payback. But if you don't get your payback, then you go into frustration mode. I'm lucky, I would say 9 times out of 10, I rarely get in frustration mode. But frustration mode is that shouting.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm going to be heard by being... I remember once I said to my next door neighbour in this place in Lewisham, I said, I wish they'd give me 100 quid a week. This is when I think benefits are about 70. I could survive on that because I was always finding, I was loaning off the guy downstairs every week 20 quid. And he said to me, smash a bottle of whiskey over your head, you'll get the money. And that is a fact for people. Some people on PIP who shouldn't be on PIP. It's only because they've had some need they get the extra money. But then he was saying you go in the dole office, I use the old-fashioned term, smash a bottle with you and scream, you'll get help. It doesn't help. It doesn't work. No. I think we all realise.
I think it's quite difficult when you're actually experiencing living in temporary accommodation and you might have a mouldy wall and you're really desperate for help. And you go into this meeting when people are talking about a systems change, and it's really difficult to focus on the wider problems when you yourself have got to go home that night to a mouldy wall where you can't sleep because you feel like you can't breathe, so I think it is really tough.
Well, I know the place I was in, I've been here a year now, I just realised. Before that, I was in the place called The Tip. I was lucky. I was getting help to go on. There were two guys there. I think if I go back, one of them would be there now.
Yeah, and that's the problem that stays in temporary accommodation. Just aren't short. And they're definitely not safe or healthy. And we've got lots of evidence that demonstrates how people's health declines when they're living in temporary accommodation. There's no doubt.
A friend of mine came to me about a friend of his daughter's, if I give any advice, and he told me she was put in a council flat as temporary accommodation. She had two young kids. One of the windows was, according to her, was hanging by a bit of string. So, and they were supposed to clean the place, and it wasn't clean, it was filthy.
Yeah.
I think that, and my little point is not so much the council place, I'm thinking where I was, is there organisations earn lots of money out of this. We must admit, and I've said this a long time ago, homelessness is a business. Some organisations are looking at how much money they can get out of it, and not how much they can put back in. And that's a worry. Anyway, that's enough about happy stories.
Let's move on to the really great stuff and talk about our peer research project.
I want to hear from Alex. You're a lived experience person.
Yes, lived experience lead for Just Life.
And you were lived experience.
I have lived experience of various things, including homelessness. Yes, and I guess in this role was created for someone who has that experience, but one of the reasons I love working Just Life and this role is that it's not about what I experienced, and it's not something that I need or want to talk about, which is great. But it does mean that there's that other set of perspectives that you have when you've been through a thing and when you know it firsthand, but it's just in the room, which I'm sure you'll understand. You don't even need to name it sometimes. It just gives you you just know something when you've been through it, don't you? So
does it when you started a job, all right, I don't want to hear about your story. We'll wait for your book to come out.
No doubt it will not be about that. It will be about pixies and fairies, but that's another story for another time. Continue.
From your part, did you relate? I know you relate, but did you find, because what we have to look at when we're working in these areas is boundaries. Did you ever find it difficult with boundaries?
Oh, I don't know. I think boundaries is a really interesting human topic anyway, for many people. I think definitely through working in homelessness, I've learned a lot about boundaries that's been helpful in life, which is great, I think. I think there's something really interesting about the role of boundaries because my role is all about creating more ways that people with lived experience can get involved in our organisation, lead it, co-design it, help with our research output, really steer it, And so a lot of the work that I do is about boundaries in a way, and what the boundaries are, and how us as workers and us as people with lived experience, I have a foot in both worlds, so I can say us for both, like how we interact with those boundaries, because boundaries are there for a reason. but also there is something about construction of boundaries that has been done in a maybe a more old-fashioned model of service user, service provider, whereas actually moving into a different paradigm where we're actually saying we need to be designed by the voices of people who's experienced it. It's a completely different way of looking at things. It's much more about well, it's centering experience, isn't it, rather than centering a service user, as it were.
Just my curiosity.
Yeah, so I think this idea of boundaries is a really important one, but I think that it's an interesting discussion to have in terms of what does it mean in this different way of doing things. Do you know what I mean?
I'll give you an example. I got a friend of mine. It was when I was at Cardboard. I was her mentor. She was the assessor for the peer mentoring course. She was a member as well. And when it came to COVID, she would tell me that she'd allow people to phone her at any time. And I said, no, you're then destroying any sort of like professionalism.
Yeah.
But if they phone me at 1 o'clock and she was up at 1 o'clock, all right, it's okay. And I would say it's wrong. So, it's creating rules from both sides.
Yeah.
That's how I see boundaries. You're just creating a rule. You have to have a relationship with the person, whoever they are. I had a rep who said to me, all the members are friends. I said, how can I be your friends? We've got 300 members. You know them all. I was approachable, and some people did think I was their friend. I wasn't. I was just approachable. So it's a question of boundaries. Anyway, let's discuss now. Come to you. You're on the hot seat. You said something about your work.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So peer research, this is the exciting thing that I think is just great. So we started a program of peer research last year. So I guess first of all, I should explain what peer researcher is to everyone out there who may not know. So peer researcher is someone who is trained in research skills and carries out research, but on a topic that they have first-hand experience of. And very often, but not always, the term means someone who's not been academically trained in research. Though I think I question that a little bit. I think it can be a bit more blurry than that. But ultimately, peer research, you're researching a topic you have first-hand experience of. So we basically decided last year, when my role was created, that it was really important that the lived experience work in Just Life wasn't just all flowing from me, because there's more lived experience than just me. We have other people in the staff who have lived experience, whether they're out or not. We have our clients that we work with. We have people we contact through research. So we decided, given that we've got such a successful research team, that we'd set up a program of training other people with lived experience in research skills. So that's what we did. We recruited a group of 5 people, and they came along every week, and we basically did a 12-week training program in research skills with breaks in between, so people would go away and reflect on what they were learning, doing a lot of reflection around their own boundaries, actually, because we wanted it to be psychologically safe. We also offered one-to-ones and support. We trained people in things like research methods, so not just interviews and conversations. So we did training in that, but also creative research methods and in ethics in research. And we literally train people in what it takes to design a research program from the very bottom, from what do we want to research to what's our question to how do we do this ethically and inclusively. And our first group of researchers are now about to do their first research project. So we've got a group that meets weekly, a lovely bond. It's an amazing bond, really brilliant trust and creativity in a group. And they're about to they've just launched a survey, which we could send you the link to, actually, though it is only Brighton based, but in case there's any Brighton people listening, if you'd be willing to share, that'd be awesome. So they're about to do this survey, and then they're going to hold a research event where they'll be asking questions about how people's intersecting parts of their identity, how they can prevent people of different intersectionalities ending up in temporary accommodation. So it's about prevention.
What you mean by intersectionalities? Because
So it's a really interesting concept that we have framed our work in. So intersectionality is the idea that all of us, we all have different aspects to our personality. So for me, for example, I am neurodivergent, white woman who is working class, etc., etc. And those are all different parts of my identity. And intersectionality is about how they overlap and create a unique experience. But it's also about how the systems around me or anyone then interacts with that experience. So the reason we like it at Just Life is it accounts for systemic injustice and systemic oppression, as well as the opportunity to create more freeing and equal and autonomous spaces by doing systems change, because it's about the way
Alex, I understand some of these terms.
Yeah.
But I'm anti-jargon.
Right.
So what do you mean by systemic?
Oh, okay. Systemic. How would you describe systemic, Fran?
Oh, it's a really good question to ask, because I use that word all the time, and I know exactly what I mean by it. So yeah, so systems change. So it's all about looking at the wider infrastructure of an issue and seeing how different parts of it are contributing to the problem, and how you need to address lots of things. And it's all kind of part of how we really believe there shouldn't be one size fits all approach to support for people. So you can't just say, right, that person's homeless, they need X support, and they'll come out at the end of their journey absolutely fine in a house and live happily ever after, because that just isn't going to happen. And most of the homelessness services in the UK were kind of based on a homeless man in his 50s, and it doesn't think about the experiences of women who are homeless. It doesn't think about the experiences of younger people. It doesn't think about the experiences of people who are LGBTQ plus. I think I'm waffling a bit here, and I probably haven't told you exactly what systemic is, but
that's more explainable, because when we use these language, I'm anti-jargon.
Yeah.
Right. And although I understood what you were saying, I have to think about my audience as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's so important.
Yeah.
And we're talking about but the problem is we all get into this. When I started teaching IT at the day centre, I was the expert in IT. I was there. The teacher used to do it. I would go into jargon about computers that were logical to me, but they weren't logical to my class.
No, I think it's great. And well, thank you first of all for asking for that clarification. And I think it's just really important that people do that actually all the time.
Yeah, I think it's something we've had to think about a lot with the peer research project, because we're used to doing all this stuff. We've got all the language that we use, but if we're going to give people with lived experience the opportunity to drive the research agenda, rather than having research done about them all the time, so for them to say what's important, we've had to make it much more democratic, so that and that includes the use of language and using language that people do understand.
Language understand.
Yeah.
But when you got these 5 people, there was an interview process, presumably, was there?
No, there wasn't. Well, there kind of was. It was more of a casual, we met, we talked, we had a first session, and then they could choose to opt in and out in this instance, which was actually something that we did when we asked them how they would like the process for them getting involved to be, and that was what was fed back, rather than a formal interview process, that actually having a conversation, trying it out would work
so
better.
You just got 5 people apply, that's
not but now we're on to the second stage. Should we fast forward to that? I must say a big shout out to the Young Foundation and UKRI who have funded this research project as well.
I'll write some for money then.
Thank you very much.
No, my question was, sometimes it's like sometimes you put out, you get so many people come in, and then there's dropouts. Have there been dropouts? That's fine.
There's been a couple of people who've left, and then there's been a couple of people who've left and come back. But we designed it so that would be okay, because I think it's really important that people are allowed to leave if it is the right thing for them to do. So from the start, we've designed it to be flexible in that way, haven't we?
And there was and there was a larger group to start off with, and it went down to the 5. So we did. So we tried to make our cohorts. Sorry, cohorts. Horrible word, isn't it? So we tried to make the groups a bit bigger than is the perfect size, because we do know that some people it's not going to be the right for, or not the right time.
Yeah.
And we, but we always leave the door open so they can come back.
That is funny enough. Cohorts is what the woman I was mentoring, she always talks each cohort.
Yeah, it's not very nice. I don't think it's a very nice word, though. I don't like
a military word.
Yeah, I don't like collective terms like that.
And somebody actually made a remark of it one day in the class. Said, "Why are we called cohorts?"
Yeah.
Groups.
Groups. Group is fine, isn't it?
The year of 2000 and whatever.
Yeah.
But I like the idea. Because I'm interested in so many things that it's impossible for me to get involved in so many things.
Yeah.
Like I was involved.
It would be great if you joined.
Yeah, I've been asked by I said Matt Downey said, could I join their experts? So I don't have the time. I now realise this takes up the majority of my time. Plus I have to relax.
Yeah, that's so important.
And then there's and I the other part I devote to Expert Link, because what they do is great.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Me new contacts as well, but what they do is great, because really at one time years ago, I think about 20 years, I'm 70 now, so 20 years, you ask me, I'll say, yeah, I'll be part of it. I'll be part of that.
Yeah. But you stretch yourself too thin and you don't give service to any of these things.
Yeah. Comes back to boundaries again, doesn't it?
It is the boundaries. I've only learned it in the last, few years. Boundaries.
Yeah.
Say no when I'd always say yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
hey,
sorry, go on.
Can we talk about phase 2 of the project? Yes, this is where things get really exciting.
Oh, now we're getting down to nuts.
We're really getting into it now. Okay, so phase 1 was such a success, and now those researchers are still doing their research project. But we took on a new cohort of I've said it again. What is wrong with me? A new group of 5 peer researchers. So they've started, and that's all based on a co-produced peer research handbook, which we made as a result of the first group. So they fed into what worked, what didn't work, and we're now using that. And it's also being tested by two other groups as well. So yeah, and it's open source, so that's available as well. Anyone who wants to see it. So it talks about how to make it.
Now, phase 2 with the first group. We'll call that Group Alpha.
Yeah. All right? Group Alpha. I like that.
But
I don't like calling the second one's Group Beta, because that seems a bit insulting.
No,
they're just as marvelous.
Alpha minus.
Alpha plus.
They're Alpha minor. Actually, they probably are Alpha plus.
Yeah.
Because they should be better, because you learn from Group Alpha.
Precisely.
All right.
Better.
So we'll call it that. All right. Group Alpha has created a research project to do.
Yes.
Has Group Alpha Plus created a research project, or are they still working towards that?
They're still working towards that. Okay. But they've also got the mentorship of Group Alpha.
Yeah.
Which is great for them.
Do you create a buddy system? Say like.
Yeah, so we do kind of, how often are they meeting? About every couple of months we're having a session where everyone comes together and they can ask things. We did ask Group Alpha if they wanted to have a more formal buddy system, but they actually felt that they had quite a lot to do with their own research and other things that they're doing as well. So
also you could end up I won't say who it was. There was somebody in one group I was once, I thought if I end up partnered with them, I'll probably end up killing them. Because nobody's perfect with each other. I'm good.
And we don't want that, do we, Ian?
Well, I don't know. This person I would like to have killed. But it is actually finding the correct partnership.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
In each
And you
case.
can't just assume that because people appear researchers, they're automatically going to be friends because
of course
because
not.
everyone has their intersectionalities.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
people are all different people.
It's about, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure you got people there who support Brighton. I won't talk to them.
Oh, my husband was up in Brentford last night, Brighton
They
away.
drew 0-0, I know. He's
Yeah,
Brighton, is he, poor fellow?
he is absolutely obsessed.
But you do talk. There are these things. My other thing is I like my football. My team drew with West Ham, Tottenham. So you do get these obsessions. But I call them, to me, I like my football. If I'm saying Oval Sports a football team, it's their football team. I'm not into thinking but I do think my team is the best, but they should think the same way. But then it's how you relate with each other.
Yes, exactly.
Because even with a group, and when I did my counselling course, I concentrate on group work. Number one, it's easier. Counsellor doesn't have to do much work with group work. That you actually get a stage where sometimes, surely, Alex, there are times where people are not getting on with each other.
Yeah, of course. That's people, isn't it? I would be surprised and a little bit worried if everyone got on with each other all the time.
So what happens? What do you do?
Are you talking specifically in the group rather than in life?
In the group. I'm not saying like
group agreement. Yeah. So Fran's just whispered excitedly in my ear. So we have many ways basically of facilitating it. So we have a group agreement, which is something that the group makes together basically about how they want to work together. So in our first session, not just of peer research, but at any group that we set up, we always will kind of create a group agreement, and that will have things like, well, it depends on the group, but generally confidentiality, how we want to be confidential in the space, how we want to talk to each other in the space. Like, do we do hand raising? Do we just talk over each other? One of the groups we have asked us to get hourglasses so that they could say, I'm going to talk for 2 minutes and turn the hourglass over. And we've never actually used it. But they're there as a thing that could be used if they're needed. So it's about creating those kind of boundaries again around the group. But then also in the peer research, we have 2 facilitators. So I'm one of the facilitators. There's actually 3 of us who do it now. And in both groups, we've asked them to tell us how they want us to facilitate. So both groups want us to play an active role where if there is something that's arising that is quite a difficult conflict, we'd then step in and we'd work with the people to try and support a resolution around that. And I think that's the role of a facilitator in the space, is holding the space in whatever ways needed. And when I say that, I mean thinking about what the purpose of the space is, and then thinking about, as a person who's looking after that purpose, how best to serve it. And sometimes that is stepping in and doing conflict resolution. But I've got to say, we've never really needed to do that in these groups, because when we've made the group agreement, everyone's sort of upheld that. It's like having a contract that we've all opted into and all co-written. And I definitely found, not just in this work, but in all group work I've done, doing something like that really does set the tone, I think, for respect and for mutuality, everyone being invested in it equally.
I think you said something quite interesting there about having 2 facilitators, and that's something that we always have, because if you are doing research into something that you've experienced rather than something that you want to find out about, then it can be very traumatic. And so that's why it's really important there's always one person who can go outside and talk to someone if that's necessary. And you normally find that if someone does get angry, it's not really because they're angry with anyone there, it's more to do with something that's come up. I mean, perhaps
could it also be, and a thought occurred to me as a group worker, is that the theory of group work is that the group handles it all. That's why I found it easy in therapy. But sometimes you will find an interview I'm going to be doing later on. Two people are going to come the same experience, but I want to make sure they're both heard. So I've actually said in the rules to them is, if somebody's monopolizing, I will stop it.
Yeah.
But then it's the person who doesn't monopolize, who's quiet all the way through a meeting, and you sense they want to say something, but they're scared to say it. How do you handle that one, Alex?
But I mean, I think, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I've experienced that a lot in groups I've been in. I think it's different for every person. So I'm thinking about, I've worked with groups where there's been people who maybe are more nervous about speaking. And actually it's been, oh, sorry, some of our colleagues just came to wave at us. What was I saying?
Can wave back for me, say hi.
Yeah.
Hi, bye. So yeah, for some groups that I've been in, generally speaking, so this is me speaking as a facilitator, I will kind of clock who has what roles in the group and who's quieter, and then actually ask them, like, how can I support you? Do you want me to support you in speaking? Like, do you want me to invite you to speak? Because some people really don't want that. And I think that's really important, is not to assume that everyone who is maybe quieter or shyer does want to speak up. Some people, in my experience, particularly in research group work, some people actually like to reflect, and then the next group, when they come back, that's when they'll kind of bring all the stuff up. And actually, one of the things that we do in our group is we have a check-in and a check-out every single session, no matter what. And what that is, so the check-in will go around and we'll say how we're landing in the room, so how we're feeling, anything we feel the group needs to know. And also in that space, people then can bring up anything that occurred to them last week, but that they didn't vocalize or hadn't maybe had time to reflect on. And we found that really, really seems to help. And then, of course, there's other things like maybe doing group work where you break off into little pairs so that people can then have a deeper conversation. So it's that kind of thing, I think, just knowing the group, really. You'll know this as a group worker. Every group is different. There's definitely some universal truths to group work, for sure, but the personalities are all different and people need to be held in different ways, I think, because of that. So, yeah.
I was wondering about, you say you got 5 in a group, they break into pairs. So I'm breaking in half.
Someone gets cut in half.
Yeah, easy. You know, it's really fascinating what you're doing. I'd like to know a lot more. I mean, like, I can't think of questions at the moment. Could you?
Yeah. I'll send you the peer research handbook and the temporary accommodation action group facilitation guide. 2 great resources.
As you know, I'm interested in lived experience voices. If any of your research people would like to come on, get them to contact me.
Yeah.
You know, I did the same thing as I did with you guys, even though I've met Fran before, meet before to discuss it. There's no pressure. It's what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
It is the most important. So yeah, please. And God, just life. It is just life, isn't it?
It really is.
Because you are dealing with one of the most, I think, the worst in society, people in temporary accommodation. But then you mentioned prisoners as well, which is something I want to expose more on. I've got no other questions to ask you. You've both been incredible.
Oh, thank you, Ian. And so have you.
No, I am incredible. I know that. You know, just. By the way, I should tell everybody, ladies and gentlemen, I am perfect. When I make mistakes, they're perfect mistakes. And I make loads of mistakes.
I'm going to use that one, Ian.
Yeah, well, it's a fact.
Perfect mistakes.
I have several phrases over the years I've created for myself. Like I always say, I will say one thing, and this is me. Somebody said on Monday I'm humble. I don't think I'm humble. Is that when people want to thank me, I said, no, I don't deserve thanks. What you can do is help somebody else. the pass it on syndrome, and I think that's the best way in life. And I'm very fascinated now with your work, Alex. Yeah, I genuinely mean that. I'd like to talk to one of these people. Even if they don't come on, just to talk to them, it'd be an experience for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we talk about, because once I now realise I've been going 6 months.
Wow, well done.
And most podcasts fail in 7 weeks.
Oh, wow, really?
And okay, I've had Anthony on 3 times, all right, about his story. Because I knew the second time he hadn't told me everything, but he's an amazing man. Nicola, I don't know, a couple of times, Neil, who interviewed me, who I'm never talking to again. I do get some great guests. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Fran and Alex from Just Life. I should be putting a link up to their website. I'd like the link to your website as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. And all information. And that's what the guest show's about. It's not always about, I do some heavy subjects at times, yes. But also I introduce ideas. Because many ideas are, I notice it, mainly as an actor, I see it in the theatrical brigade. Everybody says my story, the play is unique. Plays are not unique. There's only 7 plots in the world. They've been used 100 times. But ideas are unique, and the approach. So thank you, Alex, because your approach is unique. Your approach, I know, is unique, Fran.
Oh, thank you.
I'll send you the bill, don't worry. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested in the type of thing I cover, I run a mailing list. And all you do is email me at standupspeakoutuk@mail.com. There will be no charge for what I do, although I'm thinking about going the Patreon way in the end, probably the end of this month. But then the people who go on Patreon get the same thing I'm doing now. I've got nothing to offer them. Although Neil designed coffee cups for me. But what you do is you get a notification of every single podcast as it goes out, the day before it goes out. You also get a copy of the newsletter. And sometimes I ask you questions because I don't know everything. So thank you very much and have a good day.